Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food. And I do this by sharing what's been going on my own allotment and my kitchen garden. Now in the kitchen garden we're revisiting Straw Bale Gardening. Down on the allotment we've been planting out some seeds, and at the end of this week's podcast we're chatting to Lee Connolly, aka the Skinny Jean Gardener, about National Children's Gardening Week. But first of all, let's find out what I've been up to in the kitchen garden here at home. Now this last week we've actually had some really lovely weather, and getting out in the kitchen garden has been an absolute pleasure. I think I've said sometimes I just like coming out here in the morning, sitting down with a cup of coffee, enjoying the morning sun and just taking into the garden. And it's the same in the evening before I go to bed. Just spending a few minutes in the garden makes it really lovely. One of the things I have been noticing, however, because not only are we getting sun, we're also getting quite a bit of wind, and this is having this horrible drying effect. It's drying out our soil, but also drying out our pots rather quickly. So watering our plants has been a big issue over this last week. Now what I've learned over the years is I always try and get my plants in as big a pot as I possibly can, particularly my fruit trees and bushes, as big a pot as they possibly can. What I find that not only does it give more room for the plants to grow, it also holds on to water for much longer, so therefore the plant can survive a bit longer without watering. And this is something, again, I've tried to pot up some of our plants into bigger pots, which does help, and that's freed up a bit more time for watering. But also my young plants, my seedlings, they are taking a bit of a battering, particularly in the grow house, because it does get rather warm in there. So we are constantly trying to keep our plants watered, particularly our young plants, but also in our greenhouse we have the auto pot system set up, which is taking minimal work. I've got to say, I check on them daily, they don't need much work. And this is something that I've got to think about in the future, how we can incorporate the auto pot more into what I do, because I actually do think there's a big future for the auto pot system. Now one of the other things that I have been doing is setting up straw bale gardening again. Now I tried straw bale gardening a couple of years ago, and although it did work, it just wasn't quite the resounding success that I expected. Now if you don't know what straw bale gardening is, basically we're using straw as the growing media. We set up a couple of straw bales, we condition them, and then we plant into that. So what I've done this weekend, last weekend, as you know, I set up the hotbin versus Dalek experiment trial, and I'm already actually seeing the hotbin is starting to warm up, and I can already feel the humidity inside the hotbin. So things are already happening quite quickly inside the hotbin. But because we set that experiment up, we had to tidy up the sort of compost bin area, which is down by the southern side of my garden, alongside the southern fence. I have all my compost bins. I don't like the look of them, as you know, but I've tidied it up and it's looking much better. But I had this area which I've always found this area to be difficult to keep it looking tidy and neat. Main reason being because compost bins are generally round, it's difficult to get in there and clear away any weeds or ivy that grows around them until it actually comes to emptying the compost bin. So I had this area that was free, and what I figured I would do is place a couple of straw bales down there and try it again at straw bale gardening. The idea being the straw bales are going to sit there, going to block out any weeds, and we're still going to be using it for growing our produce. Now when I did straw bale gardening in the past, I don't think I quite got the conditioning level right. The idea being is that the straw starts to break down and warm up and starts to turn into compost before we start using it. It takes about 2 weeks to get the straw that conditioned. What I did when I tried this a couple of years ago is that I used chicken manure pellets to start this off, a high nitrogen feed. And that is where I think I went wrong. What I should have used was urea, or something that has got a lot more nitrogen in it. And that's what I got. I got myself a can of urea, and every other day we basically pour on a bit of this urea for the next couple of weeks, as well as watering them on a daily basis. There is a bit of a science behind this and a bit of a technology in what we have to do behind this, but basically over the next couple of weeks we're going to be conditioning those straw bales. They should heat up, start to break down, and then just in time sort of for May they should be ready for planting out things like squashes and pumpkins. They are what I'm planning on growing in these. Now, one of the things that I found when I did this straw bale gardening in the past was that the compost that we actually got from it, straw bales did break down towards the end of the season. They just didn't break down fast enough, but we actually did produce a lot of compost. And I used that compost as a mulch on some of my beds last year, although there was still some unbroken down straw, and that straw did bring in a lot of slugs and snails, we believe. What I'm hoping is that because we're doing it properly this time, it will break down enough, we'll have enough compost from these straws to fill up our beds. And if we can get it to work here at home, we can then take this down the allotment, put up some straw bales down on the allotment, and try and produce enough compost down on the allotment to fill up the beds. As you know, on the allotment, trying to have enough compost for the season is always a challenge. We can do it here at home, but we really want to get it down on the allotment that we have enough compost. So that's what we've been doing here at home, just setting up this straw bale garden in order to try and get straw bale gardening to work for us. Now, if you've got any ideas or interested in straw bale gardening, I highly recommend the Digwell Greenfingers YouTube channel. He's actually done a lot of investigation and trialling with straw bales, and he's sort of part of the inspiration why I decided to give straw bale gardening a go again. Now, for me, I'm hoping that this is going to work much better this time. As I've already said, it was successful last time, but I think it could be better. But that is all set up down the side of my fence, and that looks pretty darn good, I have to say. Right, with that, I'm going to head on down to the allotment. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Hey, I'm just going to interrupt this podcast quickly and ask if you would be good enough to leave a rating and review on your podcast provider. Only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us and helps us get found by more people who might also be interested in growing their own food. Added to that, if you want to help support this podcast, keep this podcast running, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. I charge just £5 a month to be a member, but for that £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ, and I normally do these about twice a week. Added to that, once a month you will also receive our monthly seed pack through your letterbox every month that you are a member. In that pack you will get a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month. And also you get a copy of our mini newspaper, which give you a few ideas of what you can be doing throughout that month, as well as instructions on how to grow those seeds. I personally do think it is a great deal, and more importantly, it really does help keep this podcast running. Now, this week we have actually been sowing some coriander and some pea, both of which are some of the seeds that I've sent out this month in April's seed pack. I normally try and send out 6 packs of seeds every month, and that is just 2 examples of what we've sent out. Now, if that is something you would be interested in, then head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and hopefully sign up. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm down on the allotment now, and here we are, second weekend of April, and I can already see there's some really good signs that the growing season is upon us. My fruit trees, cherry, pear, apple, they are in full bloom. They look absolutely stunning. The pear tree particularly is just covered in hundreds and hundreds of little white flowers, which is encouraging because we need the flowers to produce the fruit, of course. Apple tree, those red flowers, it just looks absolutely stunning. I'm very, very, very happy. But it's not just that I'm seeing signs of growth. My onions, my garlic, they've put on some growth. The potatoes that we planted out nearly a month ago now, they have started to just poke through the soil. This all gives me hope. This all tells me that spring is definitely here and that things are moving on. Now, throughout this week, we've been, of course, carrying on with just trying to keep on top of the weeds, keep things ticking over nicely. Weeds are starting to grow at quite a rate now, so it is becoming a bit of a difficult job, to say the least. But that's why I try and make a visit to the allotment every day in order to try and keep on top of it. Little and often, as I've spoken about many, many times before. But the real task that I've been focusing on this week has actually been something that I don't normally do, especially on the allotment, and that is direct sowing of seeds. Now, most of my seeds I will actually sow at home in pots, in the heated propagators to get them started and things like that. It's very, very, very rare that I will actually sow anything directly in the soil where they are to grow. However, there are exceptions, of course. Carrots and parsnips. These are some of the seeds I find they do not like transplanting. They do not like being disturbed. So they actually go better when they are sown directly in the ground. So I've gone to a couple of the beds, cleared away some of the cardboard that I had on top of it once again, run through with the hoe in order to clear any weeds and fluff up the soil a little bit. And then I've sown a row of carrots and a row of parsnips directly in the soil. I've made a drill in the soil, basically a line in the soil about 1/2 centimetre deep, scattered in a few seeds, trying to be as sparingly as possible, but it's a bit difficult, I find, with carrots and parsnips to be sparingly. The seeds themselves are quite a small seed, so you really want to try and get them a centimetre apart, but that is quite difficult. The other problem that I have, because I'm on a clay soil, what I find is that carrots and parsnips, when they're on a clay soil, the soil, when we water or it rains, forms a hard cap on top. And carrots and parsnip seeds particularly, they have difficulty breaking through that cap. But I find when we sow them thickly, they actually all work together to break through that cap, that hard soil top. And what that means is that we end up with the seedlings germinating and pushing through, but they will need thinning out. So getting that balance just between having the right amount of seeds to break through that cap and reduce the amount of thinning out is quite an important learning curve. And it's something that I can't really explain. It just takes practice in order to do, and takes a bit of learning in order to get just right. However, carrots and parsnips are now directly sown. We've also sown some peas as well, another row of peas. We've got peas growing at home, but we also want some down on the allotment. Something I'm going big on this year is sowing peas. I say this pretty much every year. I don't think we can ever grow enough peas in order to feed ourselves. We love peas, and I know a lot of people out there also love peas as well. And one of the things with peas is because they are so tasty, they're so sweet, very often they're hard to actually get home. A lot of people will pick them and eat them while still on the allotment. I'm hoping this year that we can avoid that. We can get them home and into the freezer. What we're going to do is just sow lots and lots of different types of peas, try and really go all out on lots of peas, but pick them regularly in order to try and make sure that the peas are constantly producing. What I find with peas, if we let peas go to a point that they go hard, they stop flowering and therefore stop producing. By picking lots of peas when they're young, they not only retain that sweetness and taste better for it, they also produce more peas. So it's a real fine balance between the two again, but it's something that we can do. Anyway, the point is, we've been sowing seeds directly into the ground here on the allotment. Carrots, parsnips, peas. We've got broad beans going. We've got everything coming to light. Now, one of the things I've been trying to do this week as well is just trying to keep the place looking tidy. Our inspections are due to start any moment now, which means the council will come along and just inspect the plots to make sure they're tidy, make sure everything is in good working order and everything is being worked. As you know, a lot of my neighbours have been kicked off their allotments, so we've got a lot of empty spaces around by mine. So I probably, in comparison to my neighbours, I will probably be okay. But that's not a point. It's not a point. We want to make sure that we don't get kicked off ourselves, so we've got to really, really try and look after things. Regular mowing, regular strimming. I know I've spoken about that a lot lately, but it does make a big, big difference to how the allotment looks. Right. I am going to now head on up to Colchester to speak to Lee Connolly about Kids Gardening Week. That is coming up in a few weeks' time. In the meantime, let's find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe, and this week we have a radish recipe. Now, served raw and fresh, they are great and a real sign of the start of the growing season. But cooking them, I think, completely changes them and brings out their brassica characteristics. And roasted in this week's recipe, they are a real seasonal treat. And the recipe is roasted radishes with whipped feta. Now, the combination of the hot roast radishes and the cold feta, I think, is hard to beat. So, let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seat to Table, Plot 13. This recipe serves 2 or 4 as a side, and for this recipe you will need 600 grams of radishes cut in half, 300 grams of feta cheese, 200 grams of natural yoghurt, 10 grams of chopped chives and the juice of half a lemon. Method: start by making the whipped feta. Do this by adding the feta, yoghurt, chives and lemon to a food processor and blend until smooth, or this can be done with a stick blender. Now chill the mixture in a fridge for 1 hour. Now roast the radishes by drizzling with olive oil and seasoning with salt and pepper and roasting in a preheated oven set at 180 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes. Now assemble the dish by spreading the whipped feta onto a plate, then topping this with the hot roasted radishes and drizzle with a little olive oil. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, I normally give this guy a big introduction when I have this guy on the podcast, but I think his name for it speaks for himself now. It's Lee Connolly, the Skinny Jean Gardener.
Returning once again. I've said this a few times recently, but I feel like I should get you don't know Sunday Brunch, do you?
No, I don't watch TV.
Every time they get a guest back, they get like a different colour cup, like a gold cup or a silver cup, depending on how many times. I reckon I'd get like a pure platinum cup by now.
I think you are the most featured guest, except for Scott, Chef Scott these days.
Yeah.
He's catching you up.
And he's got his own theme tune, so I don't have a theme tune yet.
Well, you never know. Mind you, Chef Scott recipe of the week was good this week, wasn't it?
Oh, so lovely. Thanks so much for bringing it over as well in a plate.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Now, Lee, obviously, I know you very, very well. I'm sure many of our listeners do also know you, but there may be a few who are new to this podcast. You've got your own podcast, but what are you all about?
Yeah, so I'm all about getting children outside gardening. I think that probably sums it up the best. I think one of the things that I try and do, and probably more recently I've thought about what an overarching theme of what I do is is try and get children outside creating memories with their grown-ups. And I do this through my own podcast. I do it by going into schools, because I really see like schools being like the epicenter of getting children gardening. And I also do it through books and sometimes TV. I was on Blue Peter once. I mention it sometimes, but I was in Blue Peter as well.
Do you have a Blue Peter badge?
I have. I've lost it though. I actually don't know where it is. I'm really panicking, but it's somewhere in the house. But yeah, my overall thing and my main goal in what I'm doing with my career is just try and get as many children feeling the joy that I think we all feel as adults around growing our own vegetables, or just being outside, even if you're just growing your own lawn. I think that's something that I've thought about a lot more recently, is just having grass outside and being able to walk outside barefoot and go into the garden. But overall, I think the easiest way is through Grow Your Own, and that is why we're on your show.
Of course, because it's all about grow your own here. What is it that draws you in about getting children into the garden, though?
I think for me, when I was younger, I never did any gardening at all. Like, I never did anything at all. So I really feel like personally I missed out. And so having my own daughter now, I want her to feel that excitement I got when I was 24, 25, when I first started my own allotment. And I was so excited about growing my own vegetables and learning how vegetables grew. And I want that for children. So I want children to be able to feel that. And also, I think that by teaching children how to grow their own vegetables, we can actually get a healthier generation. Because if children know how their food's grown and how to do it themselves, they're more likely to eat it. So I always use like tomatoes, for instance, or maybe I should use strawberries as answer for Olive, because my daughter, she loves strawberries and she knows how to grow her own strawberries, and so she's always down there eating them. So that's like one of our big things this year, is growing strawberries. Or for tomatoes, she loves tomato sauce, so she likes growing tomatoes. So we'll grow tomatoes because there's that end goal at the end of it. So I do think that by growing your own with kids, that means they're more likely to eat healthy too.
I completely agree, actually. I mean, I do think once we get into that teenager stage, it becomes a bit difficult to keep them interested. But the hope, I guess, is that you've set the foundations, and when they become an adult, and maybe even through their teenager years, they still enjoy it enough to have an appreciation.
Yeah, I've always been like primary school age, so and below actually. So from literally 0 years old all the way through to like 10, 11, 12, I think it's a really good time to get children gardening. I think you're right. As soon as we go into teenage years, and we all remember our teenage years, right? Like, there's so many more distractions and life changes. You're in secondary school, things become a little feel like they become a lot more serious. And so I think actually, if you were gardening in primary school or at that younger age, it sort of goes to the side a little bit, like it's just left to the side.
Yeah.
But it's sitting there. That knowledge, if we're teaching children at a younger age, that knowledge sits there and it's just very slowly bubbling until they come into their mid-20s, hopefully get a place of their own, rent somewhere. Maybe not buy, obviously.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
even renting is getting harder for kids these days.
Maybe mum and dad at the age of 30 give them their own little space in the back garden. I don't know.
Maybe.
Go and get an allotment, obviously, would be amazing.
Yeah.
But that knowledge from that real young age sits there, ready to go when that person, when that young adult has their own space that they can call their own and maybe start growing something again. But you are right. I think in the teenage years, I think we just lose them a little bit.
I don't think lose them is the right word. I think they're discovering themselves.
Yeah.
And we've got to appreciate that they're not going to be interested in the same things they were when they were 5. They're becoming little adults. They're becoming more and more independent, which is the role of, I say this, I'm not a parent, but the role of a parent is to make sure the children are able to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, exactly. And also, one of the other things I should say is this is not the story for some children. Some children do continue growing into their teenage years, and I think perhaps we're not doing enough when they are younger to get them into gardening.
Yeah.
Because I think the more we can get them into gardening younger, and I think if we can do more now, the more teenagers we may have that garden, and the
Yeah.
more teenagers we may have go into a career in horticulture as well off the back
Yeah.
of school. So there is time for. I think there is a lot of change that can be done.
Yeah.
I think just generations past have just not quite got there yet with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophy going on here, isn't there? A lot of, well, children are our future.
Yeah, I think so. And we've always said that, Didn't
Yeah.
Bob Geldof say that or something once? Probably.
Possibly.
Sounds like something he'd say, doesn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
But I do think my main point is that if we've got to put the work in at that primary age
Yeah.
to see any real results later on in life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we've got to put the work in right throughout, but let children and teenagers particularly choose their own path.
Yeah.
Don't push them if they're not interested.
Yeah, exactly.
But this brings us up to an event that it happens every year, to be honest. But you're an ambassador for it this year, National Children's Gardening Week.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I've been doing like children's gardening now for 12 years, and this year feels especially special because I'm the ambassador. As you don't have to pronounce it like that, but I like to pronounce it like that. Ambassador sounds like more important.
Sounds like a door.
No, I won't say it. Of National Children's Gardening Week, which is a week that I do feel sometimes goes under the radar a little bit, and we need to promote a lot more. I think in garden centres, it's mainly has been in previous years for garden centres
Yeah.
to like promote, and I think that that's great. But I do think that really keeps that week amongst the industry.
Yeah.
And within gardeners that are already gardeners. I'll use a really good example of, I did a project back in February where I gave away some activity backpacks, and we did it in 3 different locations. So we did it at a garden centre, we did it at a art centre, and then we did it on the streets of my local city. You get different people come to those different locations, and we were talking about saving water and water butts, and pretty much, I'd say, I'm going to just throw a percentage out there, but 90% of people at the garden centre all had water butts.
Yeah.
When we started to go into the art centre and to just on the streets, it really come down to, say, 10-20% of people
Yeah.
had a water butt, even knew what a water butt was.
Yeah.
And so I think for National Children's Garden Week, that's what we've had for a long time. We've had this promotion that's been going to gardeners,
Yeah.
and everything, me, everything that I talk about is about bringing new people in.
Yeah.
So for National Children's Garden Week this year, we are trying to inspire a whole new audience that may not know about the week or just gardening. And so one thing I've talked about a lot is creating memories in the garden, and whether you're down the allotment or just, I know so many families message me talking about having their own allotment and spending time with their children down there,
Yeah.
which I think is amazing. And sometimes I miss my own allotment because I wish that Olive was about for that time. But it's about creating those memories together while you're growing.
Yeah.
And so that's what National Children's Garden Week for this year is going to be about. And so we're going to go on a school tour. Again, going back to that epicentre of schools being the place where we can branch out to families. We're going to go on a school tour that gets 10,000 children, all gardening within 1 week, all sowing seeds, and then all going home and spending the half term, which happens to be National Children's Gardening Week, spending time together with their grown-ups and creating some memories and just being outside. And hopefully the idea is that we're going to get some more gardeners, more gardening parents, more gardening grandparents, more gardening children, all through that 10,000 children tour.
Yeah. I mean, I find this really interesting because you've mentioned garden centres and you're already preaching to converted there.
Yeah.
They are gardeners, and we want the people who don't garden. And I think the one thing that turned more people onto gardening that I can think of, 5 years ago, COVID.
Yeah.
Because people were bored, they needed something to do that they could do outside in their garden. It was perfect. Unfortunately, I don't think we've capitalised that. I mean, we're going off topic slightly here, but it brings it about because we haven't capitalised as an industry on that extra million people, wasn't it, or something?
Yeah.
They got into gardening, and now it's gone by the wayside again.
I don't think we capitalise that on in life.
Yeah.
If I'm honest with you, it's not just our industry. I don't think we capitalise on life, because I remember when we used to talk about as a family, like spending more time with each other and making sure we don't block out every single weekend to go and see people. But actually, I think because of the shock of what happened in 2020, there was still that desperation to get back to some normality.
Yes.
And people fell into that quite quickly.
Yeah.
Looking back on our own gardening industry side, the good thing is people did go outside and garden. They may have gone back into normal life and forgot about the garden, but that's happened, isn't it? It's a memory sitting right there, which only needs a little bit of igniting to kick off again.
Yeah.
And they're straight back into it and remembering that feeling.
Sure.
So if I talk about the feeling of me when I was 24, 25 down that allotment when I first started gardening, it's always in me. So I'm always thinking about that. If I do sway off of gardening for a little bit and maybe just spend time with family or do other stuff, that's always there. That memory, that thought, that I can just go straight back into it and go, oh yeah, now I remember why I love sowing seeds. I haven't sown seeds for a few years, and now I'm like, oh, I sowed a few seeds this year. I'm back into it again. I'm like, I'm going to try and sow everything. I already know I'm going to fail a little bit. Don't get me wrong. I know I'll be buying some plug plants at some point, but that excitement is there.
Yeah, yeah. So when is National Children's Gardening Week?
I don't know. Why are you asking me?
Oh, right, because I thought you were ambassador. So I thought you would have a better idea.
This year is the 24th, so Saturday the 24th of May, and it runs for the whole week until the 1st of June. So it's a really nice, over the May half term, it's a really nice time to like spend time with each other outside. The weather's going to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. And yeah, I think it's a good time for it to be honest with you. It's nice that we're going to do the school tour the week before, because hopefully that will inspire a lot more people when it's children going home.
Yeah, we should explain what a school tour is, because we know what it is, but the listener might not.
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah. So the school tour, like I mentioned a second ago, is we're going to I can always say hopefully, but we are. I don't know why I say hopefully. Maybe there's a bit of doubt in me that I'm a bit scared about doing this school tour. But I'm not. I know we're going to get 10,000 children gardening. But we're going to go around the country and we're going to visit 3 schools a day. And we're going to get all these children outside in the playground, all sowing seeds all at once. Like, it's incredible spectacle. Like, I did it in 2020, which was amazing.
Just before COVID.
But just before COVID. And so that momentum of that school tour sort of just stopped.
Yeah.
The good thing from that 2020 tour is that sometimes when I go into schools now, they go, oh, that really got us through, having that little seed going. But now going into 2025, doing this school tour where we go and visit 3 schools a day, we get the whole school outside in the playground, all sowing seeds at once. Hopefully the momentum from that visit of the excitement of all sowing together, that will really last into like the May half term, obviously, and then into the summer holidays as well, going forward. Maybe we'll get a few more gardens growing, a few more people sign up for allotments. Who knows what the progression, but we're not going to have that distraction of COVID, for instance.
Yeah.
We're going to be able to enjoy spending time together. So we've got the school tour, going around the country. We'll have all these kids outside. And also we've got schools as well on the Friday of the school tour who will remotely be able to watch a video, and together we'll be able to sow seeds through that way. So we're literally, I think it's about 35 schools in total that will be impacting. And that's adds up to 10,000 kids. So that's amazing. Yeah, it's pretty cool,
Pretty cool. And that's the week before National Children's Garden Week.
Yeah.
What can anybody who's listening who may have children, or even grandchildren, what can they do in that week?
Well, this is really exciting, actually. One of the things we're doing is, I talked earlier about memories, and I think this is a really big push for anything that we do with kids. So for National Children's Gardening Week, there's a competition we're running for £1,000 gardening bundle.
Ooh.
That is exactly the response I expected from you.
That's a lot of compost.
It's a really cool prize, right? And there's loads of different bits amongst it. But also, all you've got to do is get outside with the kids in National Children's Gardening Week. Do an activity together. Spend some time together outside. Maybe sow some seeds. Look after some wildlife. Just tend to some plants, perhaps. All you need to do is do that. Take a photo of it. Put it on the Instagram and tag National Children's Gardening Week and myself. And then at the end of National Children's Gardening Week, I will judge the best person that have done the most or just spent the most quality time together outside doing an activity. And then they'll win a £1,000 garden bundle. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
I think the main aim of that week is to create memories.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing from it. Whatever you do out in the garden.
So perhaps it could be a before and after picture of what the garden looked like before, what it looked like after, and that you've done that with the kids.
Yeah.
And just throwing out an example, a few ideas that I would have if I had kids.
Yeah.
That I would be doing to enter this competition.
I'm really excited to see what people do, to be honest with you. And also, I've mentioned it, that it doesn't matter what space you've got. Like, maybe you've got an allotment, which is amazing. If you listen to this podcast, you've probably got an allotment, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just growing in your back garden. Or maybe you're growing on your balcony. Or maybe you've just got a windowsill. I think that's important. It'd be interesting to see people that have just got a windowsill. They want to create a little garden from that.
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter what space you've got, as long as you do something in that space.
Absolutely.
There's community gardens that you can go and visit. There's so many different options, but as long as you're outside spending time together, I think that there's so many different possibilities where that can take you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you want to enter that, it's childrensgardeningweek.co.uk.
childrensgardeningweek.co.uk. Link, of course, will be in the show notes. Well, Lee, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day. I'll let you get on now.
Thanks, mate.
I think you've got a lot of gardening to do to get ready for this week. Well, it's always a pleasure to have Lee on, as always. So thank you to Lee for that. Thank you to Scott as well for the recipe of the week. Great use of radishes. I've got a few radishes that are nearly ready in my garden, so I'm going to be trying that recipe out with those as well. On that note, we have, of course, had a few comments come in. If you have enjoyed this podcast, then please do leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. We had quite a few comments on YouTube about congratulating us on our 600 episodes. That came from Anna, Ian and Stuart, and that's the same on many social media platforms. Thank you to everybody for 600 episodes and what have you. On that note, over on Spotify, Lynn says, "Hi Richard, huge congratulations on 600 episodes, fantastic. Talking of compost bins, I do use the Dalek ones, but I only use black ones, plus place them in a row against the wall where we live. It's finished in wooden slats on the outside so that compost bins are not so obvious, I hope. I just want to say that this year my seed sowing and potting up has been so much easier. I am far more organised and in control with all the time saving. Thanks for the tips and advice. It has helped." Lynn, you're very welcome, Lynn. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. We've also heard from Colin as well. Thank you very much, Colin. Colin says, "Great podcast as usual, Richard. Nice to hear about another type of composting that's a bit more visually appealing. I've just added some pallet collars in the garden and I'm waiting on compost. Exciting times ahead. Keep up the great work." Thank you very much, Colin. You might find Straw Bale Gardening a good way to fill up those pallet collars. Just saying. Well, if you have enjoyed this podcast, as I said, please do rate and review. It only takes a few seconds, but it means the world to us. Not only that, if you have enjoyed this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of our supporters club. Details on that at veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. You can also head to veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, leave a comment on the bottom of a blog post, or you can leave us a voicemail using our SpeakPipe service. We've recently been having a few troubles with the website, but thankfully now we are on track to get that sorted. So please do head to that and leave us any info or feedback. Also, If you want to get in touch, you can find us on social media. I'm on pretty much every platform. You can also email me, richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. And of course, we have the Veg Grower Podcast Facebook group if you want to chat as well. Well, I think that just about sums everything up. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.